Hi, everybody. We are Central Group 2. We focused our behavior change project on increasing our step intake. My name is Samantha Reed. I am 28, and I'm going into my 5th year of teaching special education for grades 7 through 12.
Hi everybody, I'm Andy Aramayo. I'm 24 years old and I have been working as a line therapist at an ABA clinic for a little over 2 years now.
Hi, I'm Alexa Ramirez and I am 27 years old and I've been working with students with disabilities for the past 4 years.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Nanny. I am 23 years old and I am working as a line therapist in an ABA clinic for a little over a year now.
Hello, I'm Jana Flanagan. I am 54 years old and I've been working with students with disabilities for the past 30 years. The last 10 years, I've been a special education teacher, typically with autistic kiddos, grades K through 2.
Hi, I'm Emily Kiner. I'm 32 years old. This is my 8th year of teaching in a self-contained autism room.
All right, the purpose of our study. As a group, we chose this specific study because we were motivated and excited to replicate the concept of increasing daily steps. Though we all live different lifestyles and have different occupations, one of the things we agreed on was the fact that technology has played a part in decreasing the amount of physical activity in our daily lives. By tracking the number of steps, we would not only be able to monitor our physical activity, but also reduce the risk of obesity as well. So the original study that we focused on was the study done by Curdy and Dallery entitled Internet-Based Contingency Management Increases Walking in Sedentary Adults. As we read through the text, there were 2 experiments within this study. The first experiment used contingency management of payment for increasing steps. It followed the same concept, but with no contingency management through payment was involved in this study, which led to more variability within the intervention. In this study, 6 individuals participated, 1 male and 5 females, ranging from ages 60 to 67. The daily baseline for these participants were all under 6,000 daily steps and would increase their goal each week based on the steps taken the week before. All participants were required to record their total steps taken that day each night to track their progress. 5 of the 6 participants increased their steps during the intervention. And then after the experiments were completed, all participants completed questionnaires. Now Jana will talk about the literature review for our replication project.
Thank you. In looking at the literature, there is a lot of evidence that there's a lot of sedentary activity. 43% of American women choose sedentary items to participate in when they are in their leisure time. And the CDC is very concerned about the adult sedentary population. And so they have recommended 150 minutes of moderate exercise each week. Now, when pedometers came out originally, they were made for a 10,000 step goal. And that's where the idea of walking 10,000 steps a day actually comes from. But if you take the average daily steps of a person that has an average job that with some movement of 6,000 steps, and you increase that to 10,000 steps, it would actually require an additional 30 minutes of moderate activity each day. This would then meet that CDC guideline. And walking has become a great way of increasing exercise. Research studies also wanted to know if walking in 10,000 steps a day would have medical benefits. So they tested over 56 overweight adults for their body mass index, blood pressure, cholesterol. And those people that actually adhered to the 10,000 steps had noted improvement in those issues, in their weight and body mass and body fat. The people that did not adhere to the 10,000 steps a day also showed benefits, and both groups in the study actually increased their walking steps. But what was interesting is that 32% of the people in this study actually dropped out before it was finished. And in a lot of the random control trials, what you see is this dropout. In addition, if we move on, we can find that the reinforcement of walking, part of that is the social support. Women that walked together actually had more reinforcing, participated in walking, and it was more reinforcing to them, and then they increased their behavior. Another thing that's reinforcing about these programs is actually monitoring your steps as you walk. Using a pedometer or a Fitbit. In this one particular single case study that Miller completed, the subject wore a Fitbit and he would watch it throughout the day. And as he saw his steps increase, he would increase his walking and make sure that he met his daily goals. Some of the studies used dual control, randomized control groups, and they provided monetary reinforcements for one group and not for the other. What they actually did find is that the group with the monetary reinforcements had an average of 2,000 more daily steps. These same researchers went again on the next year in 2014, and they looked at both, and they provided monetary reinforcements to two groups of walkers. But this time what they did is after treatment, one group went into maintenance, only receiving reinforcement and attention-based reinforcements, and the other group had a monetary reinforcement thinning schedule so that they continued that money a little bit longer. And they actually were able to see that doing a systematic reinforcement thinning schedule continued an increase in steps through maintenance. Emily is now going to go ahead and look at our behavioral definition of stepping.
Thank you, Jana. Our behavior definition for this study is any step that is measured by a measuring device, such as a Fitbit, worn on the subject, which occurs in a natural environmental or an exercise equipment. Non-examples of our behaviors that do not activate the device will not be counted, such as sitting, napping, driving, typing, or studying. The experimental design we chose was a single subject changing criterion design. This design allowed for each subject to graph and chart their own data into a Google Doc. Each subject's criterion was based on their own baseline data, and each increase in criterion was based on the subject's previous 5 days of recorded steps. This design allowed the subjects to meet their own goals at their own fitness level. All participants were female, ages 23 to 45. They described their activity as levels as ranging from moderately sedentary to active. Their stair-step approach allowed the gradual increase in goals while increasing activity levels across subjects. Now, Andy will talk about our baseline and intervention procedures.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to discuss the baseline procedure and intervention procedures used both in the original study and our replicated study. So using a step counter tool of our choice, we gathered the number of our steps for a period of 5 days. This is for baseline, and the fourth highest step of the baseline was used as the goal for intervention phase 1. In the intervention phase procedure, we again collected our number of steps using the tool of our choice. And if the goal was met for 3 or more days in that 5-day consecutive period, the new goal was set as the fourth highest step of that intervention phase. So that would be intervention phase 1. If the goal was not met for 3 or more days in the 5-day period, the goal remained the same for the next intervention phase. If the goal of 10,000 steps or more was met by the participant, it then went into a maintenance phase and no new goal was made. So here are some of the tools that we use to measure our steps. Having as many as 6 members in a group, we all had different preferences and so varied in our tools. We used the health app, the steps pedometer and step counter app. Some of us used the Fitbit or the UA band, Apple Watch, and some of us used an old school pedometer. I will let Alexa here talk about the data log.
Okay, thank you. Here is an example of our data log, and we used it to fill out our data, obviously, on our Google Doc, which helped us remain accountable during the study. And as time passed, we added dates for the other phases. And due to us living throughout the Midwest, it was not possible to complete visual observations. So therefore, we took screenshots or pictures of the devices we used to collect the amount of steps walked. And here are examples of what each participant's data collection device looked like. And Andy will now be the first participant to discuss results.
Okay. So here is a picture of my graph on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side are the averages, the range, and the goal for each phase. Here, so as you see, the title is increasing number of steps, and over here on the y-axis, we have the number of steps per day. On the x-axis here, we have the days, or sessions that we used, that I used. So you see here in baseline, my steps were all over the place, which was pretty beneficial for me for intervention phase 1. In intervention phase 1, I met the goal for 3 or more days. And as I mentioned, if you meet the goal for 3 or more days, a new goal is set to the 4th highest step. So in criterion 2, my steps did not do so well. And so for criterion 3, my goal remained the same. I will now allow Stephanie to discuss her results.
Okay, so my graph is in the same format as Andy's, changing criterion. We have the same axis and y-axis. And looking at mine, I definitely can say that change in routine is what influenced my data. So my baseline, I was pretty sedentary. I had a lot of deadlines for school and work during this period of time. So my lower steps in my baseline definitely set it up to where it was easier for me to meet that goal in my following intervention phases. In my intervention phase 1, I went on vacation. I went to a location where the only mode of transportation was by horse-drawn carriage, walking, or biking. So my activity level definitely did increase while I was gone during intervention phase 1, which allowed me to enter in that maintenance phase of since I reached 10,000 steps for 3 days or higher. However, coming home from that vacation, there was a lot of driving, and then there was back into the routine of school and work. So as you can see, my steps went from being high to low again, back into my normal routine. So unfortunately for intervention 3, my goal did not increase because I did not make the 10,000 steps 3 days or more for intervention 2. So I definitely think, as we discuss in our limitations later, that change in my routine definitely influenced my results here. And now I will pass it over to Sam to discuss her results.
All right, so as I looked back on my data, I realized that my 4th highest data point in my baseline affected the rest of my intervention process. During the baseline phase, my 2 highest data points are days that I went for a 2-mile plus run. Because of those data points, though, my goal for the duration of the intervention was higher than it would have been if I didn't go for those runs during that phase. This is a limitation for me, as I feel my goal was set a little bit higher than I feel I was able to maintain right off the bat. At the beginning of the intervention, especially with the high need for me to spend time doing non-physical activities such as homework and group meetings, like Stephanie mentioned. Although I did not meet my goal, I do believe by having this graph, having to graph my steps every night, I became more aware of how many steps I was taking, and it kind of encouraged me to move a little bit more, even if it was not enough to meet my goal. Now Alexa's going to talk about her results.
Okay, so as I look at my data and think back as to how my schedule has changed over the past month, during the month of June, I started to work half days, where some days became more active than others, and my baseline was pretty variable. But then looking at my first intervention, I did a lot of swimming at work, and with having to do more sedentary work at home, that took time and energy away from being able to get more steps in. So that led me not to reach my first goal of the 6,403 steps that was set during baseline. During the second intervention, I started my half marathon training. So I had 3 high days where I ran at least 3 miles, and then my other walking around added to that. And my low days were noticeable because they were my rest days. So my running schedule did help me reach my goal in the second intervention and even the protocol goal of 10,000 steps, but only twice in that phase. So that continued on to intervention 3. And even with my running days and summer schedule, schoolwork, I was unable to meet the goal at least 3 days for the last intervention phase. So I did become more aware of my steps, and time spent running took away from any other time I would have spent walking around. But while my data is still not consistent, I was happy with an increase in my steps. So now Jana will follow with her results.
When I look at my graph and see how everything changed from baseline to criterion, I really was able to achieve that stair-step criterion of going up. Part of the reason is that my baseline started out pretty low. That was during a period when I was over a 4 or 5 day weekend and we were traveling from place to place, long distances in a vehicle. And then when I came back, you could really start to see the days that I went to school and worked. The other thing is that I typically exercise 3 times a week anyway, so I changed my exercise routine to account for this intervention. And instead of being on the bicycle, I would be on the treadmill. I've had experience in the past with using a pedometer, and so I really had a very good idea of how many steps I needed to take during exercise in the morning based on what my activity level would be the rest of the day to meet my criterion. And I was able to keep that up until the intervention 3. And at that point, my steps just got too high for me to keep. Summer school was over, and I started really hitting the books and the typewriter, so, or computer. And so when I look at this, what I can say is that I found the pedometer very reinforcing to me, and it did encourage me to try to work to meet my goals. I liked graphing the data along the way, but at the same time, it was much more reinforcing to spend the time studying, knowing that it was going to affect a grade on a test than taking steps to make my graph look better. So those were my results. And Emily's going to talk about her results now.
Emily, your microphone.
Yeah.
Sorry. Better?
Yes.
Okay. My activity level is pretty high due to having 2 kids that I run after throughout the day. To start, this study made me more conscientious about the amount of steps I was taking throughout the day, though. During my baseline session, it remained pretty steady. The low data point during baseline was due to a homework a day. In my first intervention stage, I was able to meet my criterion of 6,790 steps due to a high amount of activities with my family, such as taking walks together, playing outside, and going to different activities around where I live. In the second phase of the intervention, there was a spike over 10,000 steps, and we walked a lot that day with fun activities with the kids on vacation. The drop in the last 4 days was due to a lot of driving towards another vacation spot and more homework. In the third stage of the intervention, there was 1 day where I had 2,700 steps due to it was another homework day. Then I was able to meet the criterion of 8,777 steps on the last 4 days. There was also 3 out of 5 days in the last intervention stage that I got over 10,000 steps. And now I'm going to talk about the discussion we're going to start the discussion section of our research. This is basically just a summary of what we did as our research project. We examined the effectiveness of the intervention to increase steps. We're all ages 23 to 54. The consequences were just accountability to each other. The motivation was no true motivation to increase steps. There wasn't a real good positive reinforcement to make us all want to step more. And the treatment fidelity was submitting pictures or screenshots of devices used to measure step count and logging steps in a Google Doc table every night. Now, Stephanie's going to talk a little bit more about the discussion.
All right, so in this part of the discussion, we're going to talk about what worked and what didn't work. So some kind of pros and cons for our study. So what worked is that we did have some members that were able to increase their steps. So as you could see by some of our results that some people did have their criterion lines have that stair step. So that was great. And it also made us conscious of steps that we were taking. So having to take those screenshots at the end of the day, we were constantly seeing how active we were during the day. So that was good as well. And it was also, we were accountable to each other as motivation. So as Alexa showed in our example of our data log, I would get on there and record my steps for the day. And I was also able to see what other steps everyone else had. So it was kind of motivation to push myself maybe a little more to get some extra steps. And our devices were all reliable. We didn't really have any issues. I know we used a wide variety of devices, but none of us had an issue of tracking that. And it was also very easy to implement this study, so we didn't really have to change too much of our lives to be able to replicate this study. And it was also very socially acceptable, so everyone was okay with walking. It wasn't something that anyone had an issue with. So talking now about what didn't work. So as a few of us have mentioned, a lot of homework was involved. So there were times where we couldn't be as active because we did have to sit down and study and work on our homework assignments, so our activity level was not very high. And as Emily mentioned earlier, there really wasn't any true motivation. So I knew that if I didn't meet my step goal, I didn't get a slap on the wrist, nothing really happened to me. My data points just might not look as pretty, and getting an A in a class was a little more important to me than what my data chart looked like. So with no true punishment there wasn't really any motivation for us to achieve a high step count. Also, us being in different locations, we weren't there, as Jana talked a little bit earlier about, women that walked together had a better chance of being more reinforced and having higher steps. With us all being in different locations, we really didn't have that. Also, with everyone having different schedules, that changes too. Like I said, I went on vacation. I had a higher step count. I came home, didn't have a high step count. Some people were training for half marathons while also working. So that definitely, change in routine definitely changed our results. And some of us didn't have our devices on us at some times. I would have my Apple Watch die on me and I would have to rely on my phone. So I know that did cause for some of my data to be a little skewed. But I think that if we all were in the same area and we were all focused on this study, I feel like it would work a lot better if we didn't have other demands going on in our lives. So now I'm going to pass it on to Alexa to conclude our presentation.
Okay, so wrapping it up with the conclusion, here are some of the factors that we discussed for future research. So as mentioned before, we talked about adding a more tangible motivation or punishment to the study to help increase our steps and keep us motivated. Maybe having a closer age bracket and adding males. Seeing how walking may affect weight, energy, or even sleeping habits. Setting similar time frames for data collection. Some of us may have been up at 6 a.m. where others may have gotten up much later and then walked later, or again, ended later, so that could have changed or affected our data. Considering others' lifestyles and schedules, and then future studies should also consider how participants may have dropped out of the study when discussing the results as well. Okay, so this concludes our presentation and we thank you for watching. We look forward to your questions or comments on the discussion board.